Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Britt, Kanawha, West Hancock Athletics Podcast. This is Dan Kroll. We are live in Britt right now on Friday, August 11th of Hobo Days 2023. I'm at Lois and Al DeLeon's house with a Britt wrestling legend, Larry Hochhaus. How you doing today, Larry?
Good.
Yeah, Larry drove in from Oklahoma for Hobo Days for the alumni banquet, and we figured if we're both in town, we might as well do this together. So Larry told me he's 81 years young and he's doing a great job still in life helping people with their addictions. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I also, obviously, we're going to talk about some Brit athletics. So before we get to Larry, I have 11 sponsors that gave to the Sanger Legacy Fund for this episode. That's Nick Schmidt, Levi Don Trucking, Window World of Mason City, Swenson's Hardware, the Brit Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise. The next one is next Wednesday. Miller and Sons Golf Cars, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, Doug and Kathy Zool, Daniel's Auto Collision in Charles City, Triple B's Food Trucks, and Carlson Drainage. As always, that money that those sponsors give goes directly to the Sanger Legacy Fund to honor Bob and Linda Sanger. We pay for the West Hancock Hall of Fame. We give scholarships to seniors. We support the athletic and activity funds at West Hancock and any other community outreach programs. Anything that Bob and Linda were passionate about, we can give to. If you want to give to the Legacy Fund, you can go to sangerstrong.com. Or if you want to sponsor the podcast, you can get a hold of me and we'll get that set up. Way back when, 50 episodes ago, I talked to Bob Horner on episode 37. Bob coached and taught at Britt for a couple years in the 70s and went on to fame at Mason City High School, where he won a couple state basketball titles. All right, Larry, we're going to hit a few sponsors and we'll get started. Swenson's Hardware is your local independently family-owned hardware store and has been since 1977. Check them out at swensons.doitbest.com. Thanks always again to Doug and Kathy Zool. And then Darren Carlson is the owner of Carlson Drainage in Britt. He's sponsoring this episode. Give Darren a call at 641-860-0500. Daniel's Auto Collision is in Charles City. Jason Daniels, the owner, is a 1990 West Hancock grad and a generous giver to the Legacy Fund. Give Jason a call at 641-220-3805 or check him out at danielsautocollision.com. And then Nick Schmidt, a 2000 West Hancock grad, is a longtime sponsor of the podcast, and he'll be one of my guests coming up on the podcast in the next month or so. All right, here we go with Larry Hochhaus. That's Hochhaus, Hochhaus. This episode was originally slated, we were going to record it on Zoom in about December, but again, we figured we're both in town, so let's just do it together. And I really wanted to meet Larry in person. He's a Brit wrestling legend, so excited for this one. Larry, how's life? What are you up to these days?
I'm happy as a clam. I finally got retired from about my second, third, or fourth career. In Brit, my name is Hochhaus, and everywhere else I learned how to pronounce it in German as Hochhaus. And what's the question?
What's keeping you busy? Wife, family, where are you living these days?
Well, kind of just recap quickly. Because I'm wrestling, I was able to get a scholarship to Iowa State, and I wrestled there for a couple of years. And I'm not sure what happened, but I stopped wrestling and went full-time student. Got my wife supported me to get the rest of my education, and I went on all the way to get a PhD and taught at the university level for the next 25 or 35 years, including 25 years at Oklahoma State University, an old ISU rival. And then I got an early retirement there. And because I'm a reformed addict alcoholic, I don't drink or drug anymore. I developed skills to be a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. So I did that individual counseling, but I also taught substance abuse groups, relapse prevention groups, anger management, coping skills groups, and it was wonderful. My college teaching experience, I could tell a couple of jokes and get people involved and try to help people not get another DUI or whatever that would be. So that was that, and I've been on retired for about a year, a little over a year. Still very busy in support group meetings, helping others with their issues with drink and drug. And my daughter's in a nursing home, lives nearby in Tulsa. And so I do a lot of helping with her. So,
and I see we're friends on Facebook. You post almost every day something.
I do. I have written a couple of books for addicts and alcoholics, and I post the meditations.
Yep, go ahead.
So, yeah, here's one. This is volume 2. Here's volume 1. I took the cliches and slogans that we hear in the recovery support meetings, like one day at a time, or this too shall pass, or whatever, and then wrote a paragraph for each one. So then winds up looking like that, one day at a time for each day of the year. Well, I post that on Facebook, and then I also email that to about 70 or 80 people.
Nice.
And
so that's very admirable. That's neat. That's what I love about this podcast, is not just reconnecting with people that played sports in Britt, Kanawha, and West Hancock, but like seeing what they've done afterwards and how they've taken their upbringing and used it for good. So that's
I feel
neat.
so like I think I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and it was because of wrestling. So there's a connection.
Yeah. Sports plays an important part of life a lot of the times. So talk about your upbringing. You grew up in Britt in the 50s. Tell us about your folks. We're not far from where you grew up. Siblings, anything school related, Britt related back in the 50s growing up?
I was the youngest of 5. All my siblings were much older. My brother was 21 when I was born, and additionally 2 older sisters, and there was a brother who had died before I was born. So my mother was pretty accustomed to raising kids. And I had a ton of freedom then. Her motto is something like, "Kids are like weeds; they'll grow up anywhere." And so I was a weed around Britt, just had free roam. That was fab.
What about your dad?
My dad worked for the Bell Telephone Company, a lot of times stationed in Mason City, and a lot of times out on the road in the wintertime. So sleet storms would come in, and they'd go out to repair the broken lines. So he would do that, and he was a pioneer in Bell Telephone.
Any of your siblings or folks around today?
No, all my siblings are deceased.
And when did your parents pass?
Variously.
Been a while, or
it's been a while.
Okay.
My sister and I were quite close. I kind of grew up with my nephews, so that I would spend a lot of time with my sister Doris. She lived in Emmitsburg, Hampton, variously. I saw a couple of my nephews in Des Moines as I came through.
Nice. So we're going to do a lot of wrestling talk today, but
let's do that.
What other sports did you play besides participate in besides
football? Wrestling? We had a pretty good football team at the time.
Yeah.
Bob Nielsen was our quarterback, and he was a spark plug. And he'd throw the ball.
Yep. Did a podcast with Bob earlier this year or late last year. Good guy and successful track coach as well. So to this day. Talk about Steve Everett a little bit, your football coach.
Marvelous. He was a very sage mentor. He was a good fatherly figure. I'll tell one goofy story.
Yeah,
I had dated his daughter maybe once or twice, Stephanie, and we went to the surf ballroom, and he said that anyone who was out past curfew, this is like a Wednesday or Thursday, so he said anybody who was out past curfew would have to run extra laps. And she named everybody that was there. She snitched them out. And Dan Crockett was the only honest one. He said he didn't get back till 2. And he had to run like 10, 12, 15 laps.
Nice.
That was.
But you were on a date with her at the time?
Yeah, we went to the surf.
So she ratted you out too?
Or were you back?
You got back on time. Okay. So that would be pretty crazy if she.
Yeah.
So this guy, but you're probably paid for everything that night, so she couldn't rat you out even if you were late. So
Steve was marvelous. He was upright, very just good citizen.
Yep. I've always enjoyed researching and learning more about that Steve Everett era. I've said this many times on the podcast, but a lot of people, when they think Britt West Hancock football, they think Bob Sanger, which rightfully so. Yeah. But about a decade before Coach Sanger got to Britt, Steve Everett had this football thing rolling. We won 5 straight conference titles. That I can't remember the record off the top of my head in that 5-year stretch. We only lost 2 or 3 games in 5 years, and we're kind of the pride of the area in terms of football, us in Osage. So I always enjoyed hearing talking about Steve Everett. He just never heard a bad thing about the guy. He was just a stand-up guy, like you said, a father figure and great role model, just like we grew up with Al DeLeon and Bob Sanger and several others. So yeah. How about besides football? Did you do track or baseball?
I did track and was pole vaulter.
Okay.
I learned to pole vault right across the way in Hanson's backyard, and we'd set up. But anyway,
You remember your top jump, your highest height?
No, I don't, but I did pretty good.
Yeah.
I won a lot of medals, or several had records on several track meets.
Did you ever make it to state in track? Do you remember?
I think I might have competed. I didn't win.
Yeah, twice, right? But you made it.
Might have. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, it's your podcast. Just say you won a bunch, and then we'll go. There you go. So that's cool. So let's get into wrestling here. I just did a podcast earlier this week with Coach Jerry Kunze and Ron Kelly and Bill Reeves-Simon. They were members of the 1956 wrestling team, which was right before you got into high school. So you were an 8th grader. I went live on location to meet with Jerry at an assisted living facility in Altoona. And I asked Jerry, I said, do you remember Larry Hochhaus? I'm going to do a podcast with him later this week. And he goes, well, he wasn't in school. He was up and coming, but I knew, I kept up on the junior high program, and we knew he was going to be a good one for us. So Jerry comes, he says hi, and he's about 92, 93 years old and still doing pretty well for himself. Met his wife, Margaret, and 2 of his kids. It was a great time. So check out that podcast if you get a chance. So after Coach Kunze left in 1956, a guy named John Tlach came to Britt. And I believe in my research for the book, he came from Chicago area, and he went 5-7 in dual meets, which for Britt standards, that's not good. And he got kind of run out of town. But the thing that floors me is, as a team at state, they place 5th. So this coach gets 5th at state in a 1-class system, or maybe it was a 2-class system then, but either way, you get 5th at state, and he's gone. And I spent a solid day or 2 looking up how to find him or his family. I found absolutely nothing. The guy just kind of disappeared from the map in terms of this area.
Tell you one quick little story about him. He had a system called the bar arm series, and it's a method of grabbing people by the elbow or arm and twisting them around. But anyway, it's a lot of different moves that I recall that being fresh and different with the year he was here.
What else do you remember about him? Was there that's about it? Yeah, he, like I said, one and done, and didn't have a great record, but did well at state. And I don't know if anyone really ever kept in touch with him afterwards. He kind of just,
I think it's from out east or something, had an accent, so that's pretty suspicious in any little Midwestern town.
Yeah. So yeah, John Tlach, he's just kind of that mysterious coach in the line of coaches we've had over the years. But anyway, that was your freshman season, 1956, 1957 season. I don't have any records of you competing varsity that year. Do you remember? That just didn't have anything in the newspapers at the time. Do you remember wrestling varsity, or was there a JV team, or would you just practice?
I honestly don't remember. Well, I wrestled 133, but I don't know. I think I was on the first team. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know when that started.
Couldn't find any records there, but it's hard to find records sometimes from back in the 50s. So who knows? But you were in the wrestling room with your teammates. Program was really good at the time, even though maybe that year was a little bit of a down year per se in terms of duels, but you were learning the ropes of how to be a high school wrestler. Some of your teammates that year, Bob Horseman went to state that year, lost in the first round. Jim Nelson was the 103-pounder. He lost in the first round. Dave Hansen got 3rd that year at state, went 2-1 at 120. And then Dwayne Hansen was the state runner-up that year at 165. And then Chuck Kanawha was a state champion. And around here, I think everyone remembers Chuck. Passed away not that long ago. He was a 2-time champion. What do you remember about some of those teammates' years that freshman year getting you started?
Hansons were neighbors. They're just down the street. So I grew up with the Hanson boys, the younger ones. It was Louis, David, and Dwayne. And that was part of what got me into wrestling. And
a fun group to hang out with and mess around with. You said your mom let you just roam the streets a little bit. Did you guys cause some trouble?
I remember I was getting in fights with Louis. One time he bit me so hard in the chest, it drew some blood, I think. So my dad took me down to see Bob Hanson about this, and said anyway, blah, blah.
Yeah. I met Louis last night at the Britt Bar and Grill. He's going to be at the alumni banquet tonight, I believe. So there we go. We'll have to talk. Yeah, bite him back. There you go. Payback. Yeah. Don't do that at the alumni banquet. Yeah. So let's go to your sophomore season, 1957-58. Like I said, John Clark left. Kent Townley came to Britt, and he was the coach that helped Britt win their first state wrestling title a few years later. 1961. What do you remember any first impressions of Coach Townley or what his style was
Very
compared to?
personable, very friendly, very easy to communicate with. He was nice guy.
Yeah. Did you keep in touch with him over the years at all?
No.
I talked to his daughter last year researching for the book, and he died in a car accident. I don't remember the year. It's been a while. Something he had recently retired. He took his wife's car instead of his, and something he didn't know how to. He just wasn't comfortable with the car, so he pulled over on the side of the road to look at something, and a truck or something came and hit him. But I talked to his daughter for a while and talked about the book, and she said he always spoke very kindly of his time in Britt. So he's one of those legendary names in Britt because he won a state championship. That year, your sophomore year, 57-58, was still considered kind of a down-ish year for the program. You guys went 6-4 in duels, which was better than 5-7. You got sixth at districts, and only one guy, Denny Foy, made it to state. He actually won the state title that year, and by himself, he placed 12th as a team for Britt. What do you remember about Denny Foy? He's still alive and doing well in Arizona. Do you remember much about Denny?
Not too much.
So a couple state champions that you like Chuck Conaway, Dwayne Hanson was runner-up, and now Denny Foy. You became a champion the next 2 years. Was it easy to see like, hey, like we kind of know what we're doing. We're doing pretty well. I have a chance to do this. Were you thinking that about yourself going into your last 2 years?
It was a phenomenon that I competed head on with Paul Schmidt.
Yeah.
And we had tryouts, and he beat me. And so I moved up from 165 to a heavyweight and did extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
My coach gave me savvy instructions and strategies, which was what you got on these guys is speed.
Yeah.
Just run around behind them and do this and that. And I did, and I won lots.
Yeah. Yep. And as a sophomore, you were a pretty regular contributor on the varsity lineup. At the district meet, you won your first 2 matches, and then you lost your last 2, and therefore you didn't qualify for state. Like I said, Denny Foy was the only qualifier. We all know, like I just said, you're going to win 2 state titles. Was that kind of motivation for you in those last 2 years that you didn't quite make it to state? Or I
don't have much memory at all.
Yeah. So, but you said you went on your quickness. Was that the main part of your wrestling style was speed? Did you use some power in there as well, or?
No, you don't power heavyweights.
You just mostly wore them out.
Beat them on intellect and speed.
Yeah.
And I guess my finals round, we were going on to the point of going back down to 154th my senior year, and was state champion again. But I do specifically remember in the finals match, the guy was from Waterloo, I think. And coach, because he was a real powerful, strong guy, 154 pounder. And my coach said, very appropriately, wrestle him like a heavyweight.
Yeah.
And I did, and I beat him on speed.
Nice.
That was how I got to be that second state champion.
Yeah. So when you won as a heavyweight, how much did the other guys outweigh you by usually?
variously. I had to sometimes drink extra water to make weight because you had to be over 165 to wrestle heavyweight.
There's a minimum.
So I was the very tiny heavyweight.
You couldn't throw the 112 pounder in there. Just you had to be at actually. There was a minimum to it.
Yeah,
so.
and so they would range, maybe 230 max, but they were frequently up at
Was there
around 200.
Was there a maximum weight, or was it unlimited back then?
I think it was unlimited.
You could have been 165 wrestling a 330 pounder if they had a guy like that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, so we'll get into that junior year here in a minute. I'm going to hit our last few sponsors, and we'll talk about those 2 state titles. Michael Ewing of Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company has locations in Britt, Kanawha, Clarion, Belmont, and Dow's. Find him online at ewingfh.com or call him at 843-3839. Miller and Sons has been bringing great service to you and quality golf cars for over 50 years. Located just outside of Britt, contact Skip or Jim at 843-4132 or check them out at millergolfcars.com. And then Triple B's Food Trucks, owned by Brett Kozlerich, my student teacher from 2 years ago. He owns 4 trucks and makes the best, always fresh, never frozen tenderloins. He goes all over a few state radius for lots of different events. So if you want to get in contact with Brett about an event, call him at 641-895-0885. And thanks to Levi Don Trucking and Britt, as always, for giving generously to the Legacy Fund. Call Levi at 641-860-0077. And then this coming Wednesday night is the second Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise, owned and run by Jared Wingert, who also owns Mojo Productions. Give Jared a call at 515-408-1074 or go to brittcarcruise.com. And my last sponsor this morning, usually I do this in the evening, but it's still morning, is the Showalter family and Window World of Mason City. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle, Fly High Coach Sanger and Joey Showalter. So let's get into that junior season. You won the state championship at heavyweight, and you weren't a heavyweight, but you said earlier to me, if I didn't do that, it was kind of your way to keep a spot on the team and let other guys have their spots on the team. So as a team, though, you guys went 9-2 in duels. So you saw that dual record getting better every year. You won a district title, and the team won a district title. And as a team, we placed 4th as a state in 1959. You ran the table those last 2 years, never lost a match, won undefeated, regular season, postseason, state. And at state that junior year, you only gave up 2 points. Wow. What do you remember about wrestling at state and winning that state title in 59?
Not too much other than that final match I told you about, 154. I'd like to comment on a cute strategy that we had since Paul and I were both almost evenly matched. We would often go dead even, went to Iowa State together in college and continued to work out together. But, and I don't remember who was coach at that time. Anyway,
tell me.
When we would go to an opposing team on a dual match, he would strategize as to who he wanted to wrestle the heavyweight and who he wanted to wrestle at 165, 154, 165.
154, 165, then heavyweight. Yep.
Yeah, so we were both qualified the way we weighed in to wrestle either 165 or heavyweight. And he could wait and see who they put on the match. There was somebody from Clarion, Sid, somebody. And he wanted, I don't know whether he wanted me to wrestle him or Paul, but he said they're the home team, so they have to put their contender out first. So whenever it comes to 165, they put their person out, and then the coach strategized, I want this guy to go against Paul.
Okay. And was there ever any controversy with that? Or was the other coach like, hey, it should have been this guy? Or was it was just a standard thing you could do? Okay. And I don't follow wrestling real close per se right now, even though I wrote a book about it. But you have to have your lineup set far in advance now, do you know? I think that's how it goes now. So I don't think you can switcheroo it like that.
I kind of moved away from athletics. I watched a lot of basketball.
Okay.
National to a wrestler, but I watched basketball and some football, but no, I just don't watch any sports at all.
Yeah.
I told a lot of folks that just hung that athletic supporter up on a golden spike and kind of turned my back on sports. Sorry, podcast attendees.
That's all right.
I want one more little quickie is that my wife, my first wife is deceased, and my second wife has two sons, and the middle son, of the middle of the three kids, was a standout wrestler at Oklahoma State University. Went on to coached 1 year assistant coach at OU, Oklahoma University. And then he went to West Point, was very successful, and was head coach at West Point for several years. Didn't overlap with Bob Steenledge, who did go to West Point.
What was his name?
Chuck Barbie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of Bob Steenledge, this junior year you won your state title. Bob was a freshman, 95-pounder, and you were the heavyweight. This would be Bob's first of 4 state titles. Jim Nelson placed third that year at 120, and Dan Crockett was a state qualifier at 154.
Jim Nelson and I were close friends. We did a lot of things together.
Yeah, yep. Is he still around? Do you know?
No, I do not.
No, okay, I'm not sure. There's a couple Jim Nelsons in the area. I know one of them, but not this Jim. So yeah, as a team that year, you guys got 4th. New Hampton won it with 53 points. Cresco with 51. Osage had 36, and then Britt scored 31 points to give us a 4th place trophy that year. You got your first state title, and then you moved on to your senior season, 1960. You said you wrestled a couple years at Iowa State. Do you remember, were you getting recruited at this point in time by coaches? How'd recruiting look back in the late 50s?
I'll tell you how that happened. Dave Hansen was on the team out at Wyoming, University of Wyoming. Yeah. And again, because he lived nearby, we were close and communicated. And he said, 2-time state champion, or one at the time, I don't remember. He said it's almost guaranteed that you will have a full scholarship available at the University of Wyoming. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was nice and reassuring. Mm-hmm. And then but I was also in love with a girl from Britt, so I didn't want to get too far away. My next offer came in from Wisconsin, I think, and I had about, I don't know, at least a half a dozen offers for full scholarships.
And did those coaches come to Britt to like talk to you, or they send a letter? Remember how that?
I don't know how that went either. A lot of it was phone calls and examining my record, I guess, and state champion type of stuff. But I had a good handful, half a dozen or so offers of full scholarships, and I took the one closest to Britt, I think.
Ames. Because man, nowadays, you know, they have film on all the wrestlers. They have stuff on the internet of all the wrestlers. They come to their houses. They email and text and tweet at them all the time. It's crazy how they do that. But back then, it was probably phone calls and letters more than anything.
I am an old fogey, as the screen will show you.
No. So let's move on to your senior year, 1960. Like I said, you won your second state title, went undefeated again. You went from heavyweight down to 154. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but talk about that. Why did you go down, and what was
because Paul Schmidt beat me out?
Yeah. So,
and I wanted to wrestle 165, 165, but it wasn't available.
So
I didn't want to go to heavyweight. So
a returning state champion
and
couldn't get a spot.
Heavyweight goes to 154 and scared the heck out of everybody I met. I can remember how ferociously difficult it was to make weight the first time. Yeah. Every first time you had to make scratch weight, that was in November. Then you would get a 2-pound allowance every month. So that in December, I only had to make 156. That still wasn't easy. Yeah. I am still so obsessed with weighing myself on the scale that I probably do it 5-6 times a day.
From wrestling.
It's part of how I manage my not getting overweight. I have limits. I say, well, if I'm not this or littler, I won't eat.
That's great. That's cool. That's not cool, but crazy interesting that 60 some years later, it's still kind of a part of your routine.
I'm not trim, but I'm in pretty good shape. And I walk every day. I appreciate being well preserved and strong.
Based on looking at the screen here, you're in better shape than I am. So good for you. So besides winning another state title that year, As a team, Britt went 13-0 in duels, the only time in school history still to have an undefeated duel season, first and only. So it's pretty cool. As a team, you guys placed second at state. I want to go through the schedule here of your 13-0 season. You started off the year by beating Algona 23-14. Beat Mason City on the road 33-11. Also on the road, you beat Charles City 26-14, and they placed fourth in the higher class at state that year. You beat Iowa Falls 23-19, Clarion 22-16, which I learned with Coach Kunze that beating Clarion was a big deal back in the day. Even a bigger deal, you beat Osage 28-10. On the road, you beat Fort Dodge 32-10. On the road, you beat Eagle Grove 20-14. Mankato came down after that, and you beat them at home 37-8. Destroyed Hampton 36-3. Esterville 39-5. At home, you beat New Hampton 25-10. And then the big one, the last meet of the year on February 6, 1960, you guys beat Waterloo East 23-13. To put that in context, Britt, small, Waterloo East, big. Make it even more impressive. Waterloo East won the Class A state title, the big class of two, by 6 points over Davenport, by 16 points over Iowa City. And then little Britt beats them by 10 points in a duel. I thought that was pretty neat.
I wound up having some teammates at Iowa State from East and West Waterloo both.
Right. Did you ever give them a hard time about that duel?
No.
You had every right to, I'd say. They probably didn't bring it up, would be my guess.
I'm so ahistorical as far as sports and stuff. I just always, it's just my personality.
Moving on to the next
forward looking, what's the next deadline? What's the next goal? What's the next?
Yeah.
And so I just don't live in the past.
Yeah, yeah. But we're going to for a few more minutes. That's
okay. I understand. There are advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
You make close friends if you're more oriented to the past.
Yeah.
So how people connect.
Yeah. Speaking of some of those guys, maybe some of your friends, Ted Kanawha that year placed fourth. You won your state title. Gary Call, we got fourth. Dennis Kral was third. No relation to me. Larry Lloyd was third. Merlin Miller, he was the heavyweight then. He lost in the first round. Jim Nelson, a good friend of yours, was fourth. Paul Smith, the guy you talked about earlier, he won the 165-pound state championship. And then Bob Steenledge won his second of four. To me, that Paul Smith story is pretty cool. You guys battled it out. You're a returning state champ. He came in, took that spot, won a state championship. That was the only year he ever went to state, and he ended up dominating on his way to a state title. I did a podcast with him and his son and his grandsons a while back. Really super nice guy. I just thought that was a really cool story. And then obviously Bob.
I'll tell a quick story.
Yeah.
Paul and I used to bale hay together. I worked for Charlie Paul, lived next to Paul's dad, Glenn Smith, out south west of town.
Okay.
Dick Zool drove the tractor and baler, and Paul and I would buck bales and stack them up and sometimes go for records. There were some times that we would get, I think our record was 12 high on a wagon, which blow a lot of tires, overloading them like that. What the heck was the point? Just Paul was a delight. Paul and I were close at Iowa State. He's just this salt of the earth, sterling fellow.
Yeah. And that was probably a lot of your training for wrestling was baling hay and farm work and stuff.
It didn't hurt. That's right. That's right.
You know, kids go to the weight room nowadays. You got a built-in weight room outside.
That's right. And that alfalfa got wet. It was ferocious to me. Fuck those bales.
I bet. And so you left Britt in 1960 and went to Iowa State and wrestled for 2 years. You said correct?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of success did you have at Iowa State?
I don't remember.
That's too much. One more than you lost, about 500 or.
I honestly don't recall.
Good experience though. Good
it was marvelous. We had an incredible road trip or away game. We wrestled Pennsylvania and Wyoming, and we'd go all over.
And then you said you were in love with a girl from Britt, so you stayed close. Was that the lady you ended up marrying? The one?
Yes.
When did she pass away? Her first wife?
We were married 25 years.
Okay.
Maybe 24 years. And her maiden name was Norstrom, Jean Norstrom. Her father, Ivan, is the stalwart of Britt too. inventor of the first car wash machines.
Oh, really?
Oh, he was very successful. Then he wound up manufacturing and selling the parts to those things and selling them to Britt. The collaboration between him and John Throkeld, who was a soap salesman, perfect.
That's cool.
They made Britt, and then Ivan made his own factory. Well, his question was Gene,
Yeah.
and oh gosh, it's been about 35 years since she died.
Okay. And she was in Northstrood. I went to high
Yeah.
school at the Northstrood, Hejlik Northstrood. I'm not sure what relation that would be, but I know the name for sure. So, yeah. So you've been living in Oklahoma for years. We're in Britt right now at Lois de Leon's house. There must be something about Britt that keeps you coming back.
I'm just looking for a vacation. My daughter's such an invalid. She's been in a nursing home and has just lots and lots of health and medical issues. And so I was just kind of tied to helping her. But if I had an opportunity to get away, I just hadn't had a vacation for quite a while.
Yeah.
Why not come to Britt?
You know,
Oh,
there's still people, you know, there's still hobo days. You talk about all those businesses. I always say Britt is still a booming small town right now. I went to that Red, White, and Brew new coffee shop in the Hobnob today. There's 6, 7 restaurants. There's all sorts of businesses in the area that keep people employed. You don't have to drive too far for a job. I would love to have seen Britt back in the 50s and 60s though, because as booming as we are now, back then there was, I mean, you didn't have to leave town for anything ever hardly. It was, you're here. This is where you need to be. So,
and I'm so impressed with the farming, the cornfields, the bean fields. Oh my gosh, Paul and I used to pull cockleburrs out of the beans
no,
day after day after day. And it's just Iowa is notorious for agriculture.
yep, and especially in northern Iowa.
Yeah.
I live in southern Iowa and it's hilly. Like people come up here and go, "Whoa, this is nice. This is flat." Like they're envious of the northern Iowa farming.
When the ice ages came, they scraped all the topsoil off of Minnesota and dumped them on Iowa. Well, the end of that's called a terminal moraine. That's about 2/3 of the way through Iowa. So that in the northern part of the state, the topsoil here is so rich, you can dig down straight down for 8 feet and it'll all be just thick, rich, black topsoil.
Yeah.
No wonder the corn just jumps out of the ground.
Yeah, we're lucky.
It's amazing.
Definitely. Well, Larry, I appreciate you coming here and I appreciate what you do. Hold those books up again real quick.
Sure.
You know, you accomplish a lot in wrestling, accomplish a lot in high school, a little bit in college, but to me, this is what really matters. It's really neat that you've taken what's happened in your life and helped other people go through their.
No, we're wrapping up, but I had another career as a research scientist.
Okay.
Besides teaching, I taught experimental psychology.
Okay.
But I also did research on human performance and human information processing, cognitive processes, memory, perception. We discovered one phenomenon no one had ever seen. It's called repetition blindness. It's kind of a unique little phenomenon, but we stumbled on it. Another scientist at Harvard published her articles at the same time, but we were unknown to one another. But what was the point? Very rewarding. Again, the curious mind of just what happens when this happens, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I love the teaching, but I also love the
learning,
the research.
Yeah, that's neat. And that was down at like Oklahoma State then, or
yeah, I taught 25 years at Oklahoma State, and has a good reputation. I was early on a phenomenon called signal detection theory. It was so widely applicable, it could be generalized widely. I turned out a senior in college, got a publication in one of our best journals, single author, a table for computing the indexes for signal detection theory.
That's cool. Way above my head, that's for sure. So I'm impressed. Yeah.
You could know me with all this history stuff because I just kind of left it in the dust.
Oh, no, great. So I appreciate you coming on here, Larry. We'll see you at the alumni banquet tonight. A couple weeks from tonight, 2 weeks from tonight, August 25th, is the West Hancock Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. this guy is a future Hall of Famer for his accomplishments. So one of these years we'll have you back for that. Next up on the podcast, though, I have the 2015 boys basketball seniors. After that's the 1973 Britt football linemen. We're going to watch the state championship game together. And then Nick Schmidt. And then Lori Tlach, she's Lori Kelly now, was a good runner. And then Amber Hejlik, who's now Amber Evans, went to school with her. Good female athletes, those two. And then I'll have some playoff football episodes mixed in there as West Hancock gets into the playoffs. Just drove by the school and saw them out there practicing, and sounds like this year is going to be another good season. So, Larry, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Great to see you doing so well and all the things you've accomplished in life.
I am honored to be with y'all. Thank you.
Bet. And thanks to Lois de Leon for giving us her house.
One little quick one is Bill Reeves Simon accidentally put me in touch with Ron Mulaney.
Nice.
And that was nice too, because he was a role model.
Yep, Ron was a state champion in 1954, and I can't remember where he's living right now, but I talked to him on the phone. He's doing pretty well. So, yeah, just you're one of those guys that are in that realm of.
You're one of those guys too.
I don't know about that.
Oh, you're doing tons for us.
Well, thanks, Larry, and thanks for watching, everybody. Go Eagles.